I know I'll never be my kid's friend. And I see this epidemic of parents trying to get approval from their kids. How confusing must it be? I grew up in an alcoholic home with a very emotionally needy mother who, if I didn't give her my approval, it like destroyed her. And that's so unfair to put that into a child's hand.
To give that to an 8-year-old.
Yes, exactly. Like there should be, your child should not be caretaking your feelings. And at a very early age, I felt like I had to take care of my mother's feelings. You know, we have these conversations about, and feel like by the time this comes out, you know, all the terms are going to be different, but, you know, borderline personality, you know, incredibly highly sensitive person, also alcoholic, hungover. Like I don't need to overthink like her reactions, but it was always like, you know, I was always feeling guilt and shame and like I need to make her feel better. And kids should never have to do that, you know? And I think for me, you know, the one story I will tell is that, you know, I also had a lot of absence of socialization. I was, I think for the most part, neglected as much as anything. My parents were very busy, you know, honoring and engaging in their addictions. But my mom also worked a lot. She was a workaholic. She had eating disorders, like all these things that you just like, when you're a kid, you don't even know what they are. So you don't even know. It's like that moment when you have to take your parents off the pedestal and be like, oh, you were anorexic. Like that's kind of a weird thing to think about your parent. You're like, well, because we were also poor. So that's why I assumed there was no food in the fridge. But it was also like, you know, like you wanted to be thin. Like, you know, it's just like an odd thing, I think, for a lot of people when they realize.
It's a fine line between poverty and anorexia.
You know what it is? It really, really is. There was like, but then alcoholism. There was a lot of like wine in the fridge. So I was like, God, we are rich.
You can afford
It was very confusing because I thought like wine and champagne meant you were rich. So I kind of, it was, the whole thing was, you know, as a kid, you just try to put the pieces together. And I think that's.
But help me understand you better in this context better. Where did you grow up?
Basically Washington, D.C. And then I was no longer allowed to live with my divorced parents. And then so I lived with my aunt.
Why were you no longer allowed to live with your divorced parents? How does that work? I can't.
We're really digging in on this podcast.
I'm not really digging in. That's this is like a dinner party conversation.
My dad was a very complicated man. And I know a lot of our parents either couldn't afford to pay the bills or just didn't pay the bills. He was very much a like, the government's taken from he was QAnon before QAnon. He's like, I'm not paying this gas bill. This is a scam. I'm not paying this water bill. And, so we never had heat. And so I would go I was a parentified child. I was like, no one's going to help me. I'm going to solve my own problems. Right. And that served me in a lot of ways as an adult. My work ethic, I'm on my own. I'm not going to wait for anyone else to help me do anything. Self-start or whatever. But at a very young age, I was like, I need to make my breakfast. I need to get myself to school. I need to handle this. I need to, figure out how to change while it's freezing in here. And so I got on an oven with I would turn a fire on.
Okay.
What is it called?
The burner?
The burners. Yeah. There was like 4 burners and I was wearing a long black, I also just remembered this recently. We block things out.
Sure.
And I think our brain dislodges memories when we're finally ready to kind of cope. So after my dad died, a lot of these memories came up that I think I wasn't able to really process until he died because I was still trying to keep him on a pedestal, or my psyche needed to keep him, somebody that I could forgive or someone I could justify like being around. So I got up on these burners and caught on fire, and I was wearing this black, it was a WWF, World Wildlife Federation nightgown, and it seared into my leg. So I had this like black, like I have, a scar on my leg from it. And I went to school and it's a Catholic school with Catholic uniforms, which, by the way, that has to go. That was the biggest form of abuse as far as I'm concerned. That has become so sexualized and weird. Now that I'm like, I would like go to a Catholic school in a Catholic uniform. That's another conversation for another time. But it did reveal, because the skirt was so short, the burn. And so I think that I might have been removed from the ability to be with one or both parents. And then I was sent to live with my aunt later.
Okay.
It's unclear. I don't know.
It's interesting that you haven't done some sleuthing around that.
Well, what is the point of sleuthing if everyone lies? When both my parents had passed, but was I going to be like, what happened? They were just going to lie to me. You know what I mean? So I think for me, I was even, maybe this is why I'm so, on my podcast, I'm kind of, how dare you, infamously make fun of improv, because I had to do improv for so long. When you're raised by liars and you have to yes and with alcoholics that are trying to cover their tracks or don't remember what happened the night before as a kid, you're just like, oh yeah, that's sure. Okay. Like the yacht in Greece that we're going to go on this summer. Like, yeah, I'll start packing. Like I had to go along with like very grandiose lies from a liar for a really long time. So I think that as a result, I'm sort of like have Tourette's about like the truth. I remember the time my dad was watching TV And my whole thing with TV was my dad's watching it. I can't get his attention. I got to get in that box.
Wow.
Like I got to get in that box somehow.
Wow.
I didn't start with I started with commercials because commercials were on so much back then. I always would be like, you got to eat the Oscar Mayer. And I would practice it. I would practice being on Oprah as a kid. I mean, psycho. And he would watch Rodney Dangerfield, and I would do Rodney Dangerfield impressions in the mirror. He would watch SNL, Land Shark. I'd always be like, Land Shark. So I would say the things that I saw on TV to him to try to make him laugh. But I remember going up to him one time, and he was very much a workaholic. I look back now, and I have so much compassion for him. He would recopy phone numbers in a yellow legal pad just over and over again. So he always had this yellow legal pad, and he was caught. I now see what it is.
Whose phone numbers?
Just business contacts and,
Yeah. Okay.
notes and stuff. He was always just writing phone numbers down, recopying, writing on the phone. And I went up to him and, tried to get his attention. And as a kid, it should be enough that you're just adorable. And, I was Shirley Temple, I was a showboat. And I remember walking away and going under this stairwell and going that didn't go well.
In my family, emotions were bad. So other than being pleasant and so any kind of anger, depression, pain, sorrow, anguish, anything that you would express would cause this kind of very suburban Seattle
Do you think it's because it made your parents think they were bad parents, or they were embarrassed that other people would see it?
They just didn't, bless them, they just didn't have a skill set to know how to deal with emotions. And a lot of parents in the 70s, they didn't know how to deal with human emotion. They weren't taught that. They had Depression era parents themselves that, the only emotion that was expressed was rage.
Yep.
And so, they just didn't have that skill set. So when emotion would happen, they were like, they were like this. So the implied thing is don't have any large emotions, because don't make any ripples. Just get good grades, be a good boy. And, so it was a little different for me.
Can I ask a stupid question?
Yeah.
Is that when acting started for you? Did you have to act like you were fine when you weren't fine? Did you have to act know?
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Yeah.
Because it's sort of that's kind of when your acting training starts in a way, right?
And I think too, my dad and stepmom, they didn't love each other. And they were together for a shit ton of time, 15, 16 years of not loving each other. So, and you could feel that. You could feel that when you're 9 years old and you go into a dinner table and you can tell that the people are kind of pretending to love each other and they don't. So then I was like, hey, here's the funny thing that happened to me at school. Ooh. And hey, how was your day, Dad? And here's some fun facts I learned. And let me show you my A+ on my science report. And let me keep the ball in the air and try and bring some love into this room. And then you're an actor, and that's all you're trying to do is bring a little love into the room. Now I'm bringing it into this podcast studio.
The Soul Boom Podcast. Subscribe now on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you get your stupid podcasts.